Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This is Yoav Levin, who's in Israel. I interviewed Yoav probably about 6 or 7 weeks ago now, I guess, and the interview's just played. So yes, if anyone has any questions in relation to, there were really two areas in the interview, that was gynocentrism and also the experiences of men in Israel. So if anyone wants to discuss those 2 points, I believe we do have one question already. So Douglas Wallace has said, you said that innate gynocentrism is a necessary part of the human survival path. I can see that it was necessary, but is it still needed? Or do you think humans could start to evolve away from innate gynocentrism? If we change our culture away from gynocentrism, is innate gynocentrism not only to inevitably disappear over time? Did you catch all that, Yoav?
Yes. I think that's a good question. As much as I understand, I'm talking about my own research, I think there are 2 levels to gynocentrism. One level, I will say it's an evolutionary, biological level, and that's kind of deterministic. I don't think we can change a lot here. But there is also another dimension, which is more social, is cultural, and there we can make changes. So changes are possible. The question is what changes we're doing, because I don't believe that we can change everything. We have the way that the society is working, especially in gender, is that we have a social contract. For example, the social contract today, it's a social contract that lasts almost a millennium, from Eleanor of Aquitaine, and this is gynocentrism, classic gynocentrism. Today we have feminism, which is the 3rd stage of gynocentrism. It took the social cultural gynocentrism of Eleanor and Aquitaine and took it to extremity, because feminism in a sense is gynocentrism. It's the same. It's only a next stage, a next level. So what I'm thinking we have to do is to work out a new social contract, and here we can make a lot of changes. I'm not sure that I have all the answers as to how this contract should look. But I think there are a lot of things that we can change and should change, because it is clear that as a species, as a human species, we are not in the same danger as we were millions of years ago. So many of the aspects of gender roles, of roles in society, and the social contract as in the past to deal with it. And today we can change a lot, yes, but I'm not sure that we can change everything.
No, very good. Yes, I do tend to agree. So would you? So I guess it's implicit in your answer there, but it'd be fair to say that you believe that there's an innate component and a learned component as well. Would that be fair?
I think there is a universal component in gynocentrism. It's not also in the human species. We can see gynocentrism almost in all primates, and actually we as a species, if we look at this, I show this in one research of mine. But when we look at the nature, at primates, so we can see the woman is a sexual and natural selection, and this won't be changed. I don't think, only if you believe that science can, like feminists say, Shulamit Firestone, she said, we get rid of motherhood and fatherhood, and when science is ripe, so we can have children not in the natural way. I don't believe in this. So I don't think it will change this basic reality. So other things, how we build the society around this is not a universal trait. I also think it's different from culture to culture. This is very typical for gynocentrism. It has a universal message or reality, but this reality sometimes is seen in different ways in different cultures. For example, Muslim gynocentrism is not Christian or Jewish or Western gynocentrism. and it's not the same. It adapts to different societies, and it's clear because societies, they are living in different conditions. It's not the same to live in Asia, for example, like in Europe. So you have to adjust. So there's the universal part, the universal level, but there's also a specific level to each and every culture. And normally they are in sync.
They're what? Sorry, that normally they are in sync.
They're synchronized, if you want to say this. It's the message, the universal message, is not going against the specific message of the specific culture. This is what I'm meaning. Even if it looks different, but it's still the same message.
So we have another question from Douglas. You touched on having had some personal mental health issues. Do you find your MRM work is an escape from this? And do you find there is a danger to mental health in being involved?
No, I didn't speak about mental issues, but yes, I had to deal with a lot of suffering. I think this is something we, as humans, deal, all of us. We can't escape this. Maybe I had more than others. It's also not everyone has the same amount of it. Escape, no, I would not say this is an escape. This is not how I became an MRI. But it indeed does help on my own path, because, you know, when I'm contributing to others and I'm giving to others, it's at the end, it also helps me myself. So the work, of course, it helps. It helps me to understand the world I'm living in. It helps me to understand what happened to me in this world. And at the end, of course, it helps me too, but it's more than this. I think gratitude, and when you help others, you see your suffering as less terrible, you know, and it helps you very much. I'm walking the Buddhist path, so we practice a lot of gratitude and giving to others. Some can give money, some can give other things, and this is part of this. So I would not say this is an escape. This would not be correct.
Very good. Let's see if there are any more questions in Hoover. Otherwise, I've got one for you. So, and I think we did cover this a little bit in the interview, but there've been problems in Israel with men who have fallen behind on payments and so forth, with child support payments and so forth, and being unable to leave the country, and even foreigners who have been stuck and so forth. Do you find that there's, or do you feel that there's a significant amount of gynocentric view within the Israeli government?
I think it's more than the government. I think this is a societal problem. Somehow I came to the conclusion, maybe it's in Israel because of the Jewish heritage and Holocaust and us being always in danger. I think societies that are in danger, they protect the women a lot, much more than in other cultures. You can see it in different cultures, but I think a culture that is endangered will protect women even more than in other cultures, because the woman is the natural and sexual selection. And therefore, for the men's rights movement in Israel, it's very hard to speak against women. It's a cultural and social and religious phenomenon. You can see it also in the Arab world, by the way. They protect a lot the women. It's not because of Holocaust or something like this, but you know, to live in, historically I'm speaking now, to live in a desert, it's very hard, it's harsh. So you have to protect. And by the way, you can see there, it's not only women. They have a strong connection between themselves, the loyalty, the tribal loyalty. And it's because of this reality. And in such societies, women are protected more than usual. And that's a big problem here. So we make changes, but it's very slow. And it begins from a cultural, social reality and different institution. I would say it begins in the religion itself, because I know many think that Jewish religion is very patriarchal, but this is not true. It's normally people don't know much about this religion. It's the same with Islam. People think that this is patriarchy at its best, but I don't think so. You can see a lot of things in Islam that are very similar to Judaism in practical ways. And From there, you have the problems in the rabbinate, the rabbinical court, if you want to divorce. You have, even in the secular courts in Israel, they adopt the policy normally of the religious court. So maybe today it's even better for a man to go to a secular court and not the rabbinical court, because it would be a little bit easier, I don't know, but it's a big problem. There's also another level of problems. Israel is a society like India, for example. It has an element of the modernity, but it has also a strong element of traditionalism. And in such societies, we talked about the social contracts. Feminists want both. They want the old social contracts, when the chivalry, and they want a modern social contract that they create as well. So men have twice to do as it is everywhere. So they have to pay and do everything. No shared parenting, no nothing, but they still have to contribute like men in the other world. They have to be also modern, to let women work, to have their own money. And at the same time, women are not paying. It's only men paying. They pay for everything. So it's very, very difficult. And I'm only scratching the surface of this problem. As I said, it's not only in Israel. This phenomenon is, you can see it also in India, for example. Also a society that is, on the one side, very modern one, but has also a very strong traditional roots.
That's a good point, actually. So in regards to India, we've in the past had we've actually had a documentary at ICMI 17 on the situation of men in India. So just one thing I wanted to bring up, you mentioned the rabbinic courts. I think I've been to Israel, and I know a little bit about the country, and from what I know, the religious courts there have a level of control that would surprise, I think, a lot of people living in Western countries. We're not used to the idea of or more Western countries, of religious courts having that much power, but they seem to have quite a lot of power. So I think that's I think it's interesting how there is a somewhat different culture there, I guess, and background. But you mentioned Islamic marriage too, and I find it interesting that you mentioned about how Islam itself can be gynocentric, even though it's actually often thought of, especially by Westerners, as being quite hostile to women. Some Westerners argue that. I've read that the limitation of 4 wives was actually an improvement on what was there before, that they basically, Islam raised this, or introduced a whole bunch of protections for women that weren't there before. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that area.
It's for us, I haven't researched Islam so much as I have researched more the Western culture, you know, the Judeo-Christian tradition. I went into Islam, and for Westerners, as you said, it's very hard to understand, but women are actually very protected in the Islam, very protected. The man has to provide everything for the woman before he even marries her, because if he can't, if he hasn't the money, and when he has the money, it's actually for the woman in the case for divorce. So he has to bring a lot, and the woman is protected. There is a reason why it is like this. Again, you have to understand where the Islam arose from, where it comes from. What I told you, the loyalty, the danger, and it's very tribal religion. So the family is always involved. And it's the same with the woman. When she goes back to the family, she is protected. And the situation is not, I have a lot of friends, of Muslim friends, and they tell me the situation sometimes is even worse for them than for Jewish men. Especially today, because the Muslim courts are part of the rabbinical courts. So partially they have to
So did you say
so partially they have to add that the Muslim, they are part of the rabbinical court. They operate within the rabbinical courts. So there are certain country rules that they have to accept, and it begins again the same phenomenon as for us. They have modernity and traditionalism in one package.
So it seems like when you describe the situation in Israel in particular, it's a lot like we do see something similar in the West, but it seems to be perhaps a little more extreme, that men are suffering the worst of these, of their traditional responsibilities, but also expected.
But by the way, if we're talking about Islam, for example, so again, a matter of women, I would say, especially when you have the romantic background, if you take all the violence in the Islamic world, it's not so big. It's actually a little bit more than in Western cultures. So women are not the main target of violence in Islam. They are targeted because Islam is, as a culture, very violent. Why? Because I explained to you, they grew out of very harsh traditions. So it's not necessarily because they are bad people, all of Muslims, but they grow out of this tradition, and being strong and being harsh, it was for sure, for millennia, it was the way to survive. If you check Islamic, for example, scripts that go 1,000 or 2,000 years back, you can see that very often there are genres of singing where women incite men to violence. So in all, actually, this is a trait in all gynocentric societies. Violence is not a patriarchal trait, it's a gynocentric trait. You can see it also in the primates. There is research on the primates that female monkeys, for example, they incite the violence and the males to go to wars or so-called wars or to practice violence. And there's reason for this, because females also in the nature must be protected. This is gynocentrism. Even in the nature, a male doesn't have any incentive to die, because normally if he practices violence, there's a chance he will die. So this is not his incentive. It's the same in our culture, in the human species. So violence is not a patriarchal trait, it's a gynocentric trait, and it stems from the reality that women must be protected. They must be protected. Therefore, the violence, the one who will practice violence will be the men.
That's a really good point, actually. In fact, we often use the term proxy violence, violence which is initiated by women, but it's the men who actually carry out the violence, and it's always classified as male violence, even though the women.
There's interesting research that about the Turner syndrome. I don't know if you know it. It's something that many women suffer from it, and this is interesting because through this syndrome research, they could see that the genes that are more related to violence were female at the beginning of the evolution, but because women must be protected, it has changed. So, in a way, most of our traits are meant, they are conditioned by gynocentrism and by women. It's not conditioned by patriarchy. This is very important to understand. Competitiveness and things like that, this comes all from a reality where the woman is the natural sexual selection. So we have to compete. It's not because we want to compete, but we have to compete. And this has to do with the hypergamic nature of women. So because they want even more, they don't have to bring anything to the table. It's us that have to bring, and we have to compete between us. It's in the nature the same. You can see it also in all other primates. So our conditioning, that's not patriarchy. That's, again, gynocentric reality.
And so, Natalie, there's a question on Zoom, a Q&A. Due to a technical problem, I can't see the Q&A question on Zoom at the moment. So do you want to check that out? Oh, there's a train. Okay, Natalie's got some noise behind it.
Sorry, I've forwarded it to
Wonderful.
Hoover.
Okay.
For you.
Okay, thanks. Hopefully I can see that. I'm not sure I can see that. But in the meantime, go on, Yoav.
I can see any questions here. Where do you see them?
So we see them in the various windows we've got open. We've got a couple of different windows open. If you can't see them, we'll read them to you. But I was just going to say, in relation to your point about sort of the origins of violence, it's very interesting that there's been some research in the last few years that looked at medieval monarchs in Europe, and they found that when queens were when the queens regnant, queens who were running a country on their own as they had the power, the countries were more likely to actually go to war and stay in war when the queen took power after the parent had died. And there's also some research that showed that was true with modern leaders, with wars happening a fairly high proportion on the watch of modern female leaders. It's very interesting to look at this.
You can see it in many cases, even in modern time. For example, Nazi Germany, and there are quite good researchers. I looked at the elections, and you can see that in the time that Germany was still democratic, before the Nazi Germany created the dictatorship. So you can see that women actually voted and brought Hitler to power because more of them voted for the Nazi party. There was a reason for this, because also the Nazi regime was quite a gynocentric regime. It's a German gynocentrism rooted in the 12th, 13th century. You have a lot of German males that can be considered as first male feminists in history. Agrippa, for example, this is 16th century proto-feminism. He wrote some books on the very misandrist, on the preeminence of women, that women are superior to men. You have the knight Ulrich that wrote in servitude of women that men actually must serve women, and you can see this gynocentrism acting quite a lot in German culture. So even the Nazi regime culturally arose from them, and many women voted for Hitler. So violence even there was, I don't know, female initiated, but it's a trait of gynocentrism. It's not a trait of patriarchy.
Yeah,
you can see it everywhere. You can see it everywhere. Everywhere where you research and go deep into the phenomenon, you can see that it's not just that men are producing this violence. Normally, it begins with women. In Nazi Germany, for example, many women wanted this because the regime gave them a lot of opportunities. When they conquered new countries, many women went to those countries. They worked there, they had careers, and it was good for them. So they voted for Hitler.
Yes, and in fact, there's been some interesting research in recent years about Nazi Germany and the role of women in the regime. And as you say, there were a lot of women who were in it. There were many female Nazi concentration camp guards, and they were just as cruel as the men.
Yes, of course, there are a lot of researchers, and it's interesting because when the trial started, the feminist movement hid all of the evidence of female violence. So it goes back again to feminism, but at the beginning, many women were ready to talk about it, and they talk about it. And this is also something that we had to thank the feminist movement. The manipulation of modern history and female violence in modern history.
Absolutely.
I have here a question. I can see it's about.
So I'll read it out. So it's from Carl Palmer. So thanks for your insight and research into learned and innate gynocentrism. How do you see these two types of gynocentrism interacting with men going their own way compared to those who are blue-pilled?
I actually don't say this. Obviously, there is a contradiction between MGTOW thinking and the MRAs. Actually, all of the different types of men's movement, might it be MGTOW, men's rights, PUA and others, they are all actually reacting in a different way to gynocentric reality. Men's rights, they are trying to make reforms, to reform the society so that men can still be part of the society. I think this is necessary. I don't think it's good for the society if men just retreat. On the other way, you have the MGTOW that say we can't change the society, so we have to go our own way, and there's no other way for this. And PUA, they try to manipulate the society, not necessarily make changes. So every one of us reacting to gynocentric reality, and this is the inbuilt evolutionary biological gynocentrism. Which one can interact? I think we all can and should interact together, because I think even as MRAs who want to make reforms, there are, as I understand MGTOW, there are two levels of MGTOWs. There is a more practical level where we can adopt at least some part of this ideology. For example, men that don't want to participate in the society more in a tactical way for a certain time until it changes. And there are those who just say, okay, we can never do this. So we have to go our own way. So we can partially interact, and this is important. I think at the end, if we're taking, for example, looking at Buddhist tradition, there are monks. They don't marry, they are not part of the society in this way, but they don't give up completely on it. If it will practically be possible, I don't know, because MGTOW today has a lot of problematic traits to it. It is different than MGTOW that was at the beginning, where they not necessarily wanted to give completely up, but they wanted to restrain, as they said themselves, we want to instill masculinity in men and femininity in women, and this is quite changing in the modern MGTOW. So I'm not sure in practical ways there is a place for cooperation, but we can, as MRAs, adopt some of MGTOW's ideas to protect ourselves, even if we marry and even if we don't want to give up on society. So there are parallels. In practical ways, I think it's very problematic today.
Very good.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because as a single female, I've already sort of got it set in my head that in my next relationship, I don't want us to be moving in together. I want us to have separate bank accounts. I want him to have his place, me to have my place. So I pay the bills, I pay the rent, I'm covered here, and so's he there, because I know that when a relationship splits up, things get divided. And 9 times out of 10, the man walks away with like 10% and has to start all over again. The woman gets a house, whether it's rented for whatever. I don't want, touch wood, that if the relationship doesn't work out, that anybody's got to start all over again, either one of us. Keep your house, keep my house. I don't care whether we see each other 7 days a week and we're at one place or the other. Just don't, it's like for me signing a waiver going, just in case, if the worst happens. So I do find men going their own way have got the same ideals, but somebody who thinks like me are very few and far between. Yes.
I think that MGTOW today has also a lot of problematic attitudes towards women. They see it too much in a deterministic way. They can't understand the complexity of reality. Even if partially the critique is correct, it must be understood that they cannot blame a woman, I mean, on a personal level, for the reality we live in. It's in the same way with men. And unfortunately, a lot of the routes they take today, they remind me on feminism. It goes too much to extremity, and they can understand it. It becomes partially very, I don't know if misogynistic, but it sounds like this, because you can't blame a person, a human, for the reality he lives in. It's not necessarily his choice, not necessarily he understands this. This is, by the way, not only in gender questions. There are delusions that are circulating the world on personal level. There are bigger bubbles of delusion that circulates the society as a whole. You can critique, but you have to understand the critique must be targeted less to the body of the person and more to the ideas and the society at this level. And this is something that I have a problem with MGTOW. Not that I'm not criticizing women or general gynocentrism, but I don't see this distinction. It's in MGTOW thought it's quite deterministic. Women are bad, men are good, and this is not the reality. This reminds me a lot on feminism. Women are good and men are bad, just because of their nature.
I think that's a really good point, actually. When we're looking at these things, and we spend a lot of time looking at gender with MRAs, MGTOW, and so forth, and it can be very, very easy when you're continuously looking at these women who are making completely outrageous statements and doing awful things and saying how much they hate men. I can see how how men will end up going down that path and starting to get angry at women. My advice, in all honesty, to any men who are doing that, go look at male feminists for a while, because they're pretty bad. And if you really start to look at them, and they're often just as bad as the female feminists, sometimes they're even worse. So I like to remind people it's often not about gender. Like I like to say, it's not about gender, and it never was.
Look, I think we can adopt. I talked about Buddhism that I practice. There is something that we can learn from the Buddhist path. Yet, yes, people hurt us. And now I'm putting gender aside. In general, suffering is a trait of human existence, whether you want to accept it or not. It's a trait of human existence. We're not perfect. We're not born perfect. We don't know everything. We have a lot of delusions. And yes, by definition, almost by definition, we will hurt other people. It can be men, women, and vice versa. So we must understand that even if we have critique, even if we're angry, for our own sake and happiness, we must forgive. You go your own way, forgive the society, forgive the universe, forgive women, I don't know what. But you can't stay for always with this anger, because at the end you suffer. You suffer at the end. And if Mikta was like this, then I could say, okay, this is a good point. You go your own way, you forgive everyone and live in peace. But this is not what happens today.
I guess that's human nature, isn't it? It can be very hard to drop that past pain, I suppose. And as you say,
of course.
Yeah, the idea would be to live in peace and so forth. But
especially the ones that were really hurt bad, and it's not so easy. It's not so easy at all. It's maybe sometimes a lifetime project to forgive, but you have still to work on it.
And
that's my opinion.
And a lot of these men, because of gynocentrism in our society, there's a complete lack of empathy. And sometimes these men have been, as we know, completely destroyed by the system. And it looks like nobody cares.
I don't criticize them, because I can understand how that was created, how this situation was created. It's not a criticism of them, but still you have to say this. If you want to suffer less, even if you want to make a better world, you have to forgive at the end, or let go. Don't forgive, let go. This is the Buddhist term. Let go of all the hurt, of all the suffering. I personally believe more in letting go than forgiveness, because I don't know if we can forgive. Forgiveness, it's actually has something to do with Judeo-Christian tradition. There is the idea of God, and because of this we forgive. Buddhists are not talking about this, they're talking of letting go, but in a sense, it's the same. You just let go of that pain and you live your life. It's better for everyone. It's better for yourself, and it's better for society.
That's a really good point, actually. Certainly at a personal level, I'm not sure I can forgive feminists for the harm they've brought to our society. And that is a really good point, actually, that letting go is a far better way of looking at it. This is something I've been personally struggling with for a long time. I think we'll eventually turn a corner, and I wonder if I can forgive them. But letting go is a much better way of looking at it. I like that. So I was just wondering I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, but otherwise I was going to sort of talk about gynocentrism and feminism. We spend a lot of time focusing on, there's another question coming up, great. We spend a lot of time focusing on feminism, but of course, not all gynocentrists are feminists. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, unless you want to answer that question first. Kind of up to you.
Okay, I'll read it out anyway. So it's from Paul Palmer again. So it's regarding gynocentrism. I may appreciate that there are rules within the interaction between men and women, yet does this mean I need to play the game? Can't I walk away without anger?
Again, there are some levels to it. Of course, first of all, society has to have rules. I would even say those rules occasionally must be broken. I know this sounds like a paradox. But still, even if you believe in breaking rules, you must understand that it should not bring the society to chaos. You bring this at a personal, you can make it at the personal level, you break the rules. This is something now in general. Society without rules can't exist. How we deal on a personal level, this is different. Yes, you can make your own rules. As I said, you can even go away. You can walk your own way. The question, how you walk away. At the end, we must understand it's a different way of seeing the world. In the West, we see the people as different atoms in the world. This is not the reality. This is one of the delusions. We are actually subparticles of one atom, and when we are doing, whether we want it or not, it will affect others and it will affect the society. So you want to make your own rules and go your own way, okay, no problem. You can, by the way, create the rules even if you are still part of the society. It's not always this will be possible 100%, but it will be possible. And if you go away, it's okay. Go your own way, make your own rules, but understand that at the end, anger it's a delusion. You see, it's like holding a coal in your hand and thinking you will hurt the other people when you're throwing at it. At the end, you hurt only yourself, not the other person. It's like thinking I will swallow a poison and the other man will die. This is not going to happen. So this is what I meant about anger. The letting go of the anger doesn't mean that you are not protecting yourself. You can do the same without the anger. It's only something that motivates you. So do the same things with another motivator.
What about with on top of that? So society's definitely got the rules and the laws. So I don't know whether you know about, but here in New South Wales, and I think it's coming to Victoria, where they're changing the rules on consent when it comes to sex. So it's like they've got the rules, but then keep on moving the goalposts.
So to clarify there, sorry, just jumping in, to clarify, two Australian states are moving to an affirmative consent model. One already has, and the state that Natalie lives in is about to change over. So sorry, go on, Natalie.
Yeah, as a female, and I'm going to be extremely blunt here. I don't want to be in a relationship, or I don't even want to be on a one-night stand where the guy's like, can I just put my hand here? Can I put my hand there? After about 5 minutes, I'll be like, I'm going home and doing it myself. Because it's like, it's taking the spontaneity, the romance, it's taken the fun out of sex. Like sign a contract and then go to town. It's ridiculous.
Go on, Yoav.
Look, I can understand the point, yes, and I think many things went too far, but on the other side, I think that many things were correct. I had such discussion over violence, for example, and there are tendency to say, for example, today, okay, there's no such thing, almost such thing as violence, only in extreme cases, and the idea behind is to say that, okay, women don't suffer from violence. Really, as feminists say, this is true. Not the way how they describe, but that feminists exaggerate everything. But still, this standardization of violence is something that they can't understand, because on the other way, it hurts also men. Because if you say this is no issue, it's no issue for everyone. And it is still the case of men today. In general, we say it like this. You must understand that you can create your own rules within the society. You can 100% protect yourself, okay? If you do this. How much? 60, 70%, 80%, there's always a chance that you will be hurt by existing rules. You can make it less. Some men will say, okay, I'm taking the risk. On the other side, I think that the myth idea that men will be always protected from any harm just by going their own way, it's also a delusion, because that's not the reality where we're living. You can't protect yourself. It's the same idea as it exists in feminism. Why they're doing what they're doing? Because they think that there can be a reality where all women will be always protected, whether by law, I don't know what. And this is not the case. It's not the case for women. It's not the case for men. So I don't know. Everyone has to make his own decisions. But I think the idea that you can protect yourself 100% is not true. I think MRAs are more right on this point. They understand that to a point they have to make compromises. They have try to reform the society, because the idea that I can protect myself completely 100%, it goes against the nature of our reality. I'm even not talking about the gender reality in general. Someone can break in my home, someone can plant something, I don't know what, and you can protect yourself 100%. You can only better your situation. So we can adapt some aspects of MGTOW, how to protect ourselves better. But to think that we can 100% do this, I don't believe in this.
That's a really good point. In fact, I've heard men express the idea that if they stop having sex from women, they won't be subject to a false allegation. This, of course, is demonstrably false, since there have been plenty of false allegations where the man did not have sex with the woman at all. It didn't stop the woman making the false allegation. In particular, a gentleman by the name of Keenan Barsick here in Australia, a very famous case over the last few years. He didn't so much as touch her, and he was subject to a false accusation, spent 2 weeks in jail, lost his job and lost his marriage, and he hadn't touched her at all.
Okay, there's another question from Carl. I see it. It says you may have misunderstood what I'm saying. I'm saying I acknowledge gynocentrism is this. I'm not angry. I'm content to walk away to be single. Does that make sense? As I said, of course that makes sense. I have no problem with a man deciding to go away. This is a legitimate decision, of course. As I said, I do not criticize anyone, because I can understand, and I think very often this is the best solution. There are men that should do this, not because they are bad or something like this, because for them, that's the best solution. That's the best way how they can cope with the reality. So I did not want to criticize, and I don't think that MGTOW doesn't have a place in the men's rights movement. I think they have, and they're a necessary part of it, and I think we can learn a lot from them, even if not. I myself describe myself as MRA, and I agree with not a few points of MGTOW. They have, on many points, they have right.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, I believe that MGTOW is collectively is a kind of economic weapon too. You have enough men stepping away from society, that alone has to have some sort of effect. That's a really good point. So we've got a few more minutes before we wrap up. I just thought, unless there are any more questions, I just thought one point I might want to raise is we talk a lot about feminism, but of course not all gynocentrists are feminists. And I think feminism is already crumbling now. I think they're getting more vicious because of the fact that they're under strain and so forth. There's various reasons for that. But my belief is that that even after feminism falls, we'll still have a battle to fight, because gynocentrism will well be entrenched in society. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think gynocentrism, it's true, it's gynocentric, but I think the main distinction that it is more misandrist. And my research, and I made a lot of publication, I published a lot of articles on this, many on my website. It is distinctive because, or I would say it's otherwise. I think that not all misandrists are feminists, but I think all feminists at that or the other level are misandrists. Yes, feminism will fight. I think the main goal of feminism is to create a matriarchy. I think, as you said correctly, that feminism, it has a lot of problems today. Many women turn away from feminism, but they are not going to disappear so fast. This is, by the way, not only feminism. If you read Thomas Kuhn, this happens with every ideology, with every mindset. There will be a battle, yes, a battle. How the society will look, I think it's hard to say. I don't believe in determinism, so it's hard to say how it will look, but for sure it will not look as it looks today. I think personally it will go for the better, but how it will look, I don't know.
Yeah. No,
okay, so we've got another question before we go from Grant Wilson. What about men using surrogates to have families with mother figures, just like women? This would threaten women. Some men are doing that like gays, but usually couples?
Look, I'm generally not for surrogates, but I would say as long as women have the right to do this, men should have also the right to do the same. Again, I put my personal views on the issue aside, and as long as society allows women to do this, I think it's a good idea. And, it must be available for men too.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much. I think we're just about wrapping up. Do any final comments, Yoav, before we go?
I think we covered a lot of the things. I hope what I brought will help people more understand the reality where they live in. I believe that a necessary part of combating feminism is having the knowledge. This is, by the way, not also true here. It's in every case. We need wisdom, we need knowledge. If we're acting without knowledge and wisdom, we are doing false things. And I hope I help people to understand it a little bit more. Everyone can visit my website. Read a lot. I published a lot of highlights from my research. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for coming on ICMI, and we will see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.